Welcome, Jordi.
Thank you.
Just a minute, we'll find me and spotlight me. There we go. Welcome everyone to VCOP 17. I'm privileged to be able to introduce to you Jordi Casamitjana. He's of the United Kingdom. He's a vegan zoologist and animal protectionist, and he was highly publicized for a litigation case that he did in the United Kingdom that led to ethical veganism being recognized as a protected philosophical belief under the Equity Act of 2010. And as a consequence of this legal victory, Jordi wrote the book Ethical Vegan, A Personal and Political Journey to Change the World. Jordi, we're grateful for you to be here today. Thank you so much.
Oh, thank you for having me. It's a great pleasure to be part of this amazing event, and thank you for Climate Healers. Well, the title of my talk is Using Board Gaming to Test Strategies to Get to the Vegan World. So essentially, three concepts there: board gaming, strategies, and the vegan world. So that's what I'm going to be talking about. But because this is part of a bigger event titled The Stories We Tell, the Games We Play, I thought that to kind of feel the spirit of telling stories, I would not use a PowerPoint presentation as I normally do in my talks, but I will exploit my recent white beard and my look of a grandfather type of person to tell stories as if I was a grandfather in a fireplace, telling you stories about me because I am the only one that has my point of view. So I only can tell you about me. So I'm going to be telling you about several stories, but I actually left a link in the chat with some of the articles and books and things I've been mentioned. So if you want to get those, they are in the chat. But I'll be talking about 45 minutes, 40 minutes, 45 minutes. And at the end of it, then it should be about 10 minutes time to have some questions and answers. But during these 45 minutes, I'll be telling you about 7 stories about me. The first one going to be my story. The second, my case. The third, my book. The fourth, my current profession. Sorry, that was the fifth. The sixth, my view of board games. And the last one, my vegan world game, because I kind of got an idea of how a vegan world game will look like. Let's begin with the first story. All the stories are connected with each other. They end when the other begin, as all stories in life. My story started in a place, and that place was Catalonia in the 60s. And Catalonia in the 60s, Catalonia, for those who don't know, is there in Europe, Southern Europe, Southwestern Europe, in the Iberian Peninsula. And at the time, and it still is, it was part of Spain. But at the time, Catalonia was under fascist dictatorship of General Franco. Catalonia had been independent before, and there was a civil war, and Franco won. So basically stopped all independence of Catalonia and others that were not typical Catholic Spaniards like him, and he prosecuted everyone. So I grew up in a culture where my culture was persecuted, oppressed. We Catalans speak another language, we speak Catalan, and we have quite a different culture, but all that was illegal under Franco regime. So my first 12 years my life was living under the oppressive regime of a fascist, an actual fascist person. That really marked my growing and my perception of the world very much, to the point that I felt it that was very hostile, very scary. The gray people, police, we call them the gray people, the uniform was gray. They were all Spaniards, obviously. That was the most scary thing I remember when I growing up. And I actually thought, well, I just don't really want to be outside with this scary world, so I'd rather be with animals. So my interest with the animals was almost selfish because they felt safer. They didn't seem too hostile to me. So I started to be interested in animals. And at one point, I said, I need to get a career from this. So I decided to be a zoologist, somebody that studies animals. So I started a degree in zoology, specialized in animal behavior, which is called ethology. So I'm also an ethologist. And I did my degree in social behavior. and I specialize specifically about wasps, social insects, wasps, social wasp. And I had an amazing encounter with a wasp, which I won't tell you now, but you can read in my book, and I can tell you another occasion, that really changed my perception about us and animals, them and us. That tiny wasp taught me so much about how unfairly we treat other animals and how similar other animals are to us, that I thought study them is not enough. I need to start to protect them. This is going to be my role now. I know enough to understand that we live in such an unfair situation for non-human creatures, and I am responsible, so I need to spend my life trying to protect them. And that led me to eventually leave my academia and leave Catalonia and try to find a place where I could be an animal protectionist at the same time to being a scientist. And that led me to the UK, where I've been living for 30 years. And through that process, I began working with animal protection for many organizations on different subjects: an anti-hunting organization, anti-captivity, anti-zoos, many subjects, and some of them I still was consuming animals, and that was a contradiction, trying to protect some animals and then eating some others. There's a big conflict in my mind, so I decided to spend a few days in isolation trying to resolve that conflict. I went in an island in Scotland for 23 days in isolation, and I wrote a novel when I was there, and I came back as an ethical vegan. That was obviously the only solution to be compatible my work and the rest of my life is not to consume any animal, not just the ones I liked. Therefore, I became an ethical vegan, and that was in 2002. And that's the end of the first story. A happy end. I became an identity story. The second story is about my case. Moving forward, working in animal protection as an ethical vegan, at one point, I worked for an animal protection organization called the League Against Cruel Sports, and I joined them in 2016. And the 17th of December 2016, I received an email. That's the beginning of the story. That email told me more or less, this is an email telling you that you have now been enrolled into the company pension fund. Because in the UK, like in many countries, when you work in an organization, you have to be auto-enrolled by your employer into a pension fund that the employer chooses. And then when you retire, all that money that you've been investing from your own salary will then to be able to use it in this private pension fund that the employer chooses. So there's a period of 3 months between you starting in a company and then receiving the pension fund. So that email was the end of my first 3 months working for the League, who I had worked before. I had worked with them 10 years prior, but now I rejoined them as the head of policy and research. So this email was predictable. I expected it, this email. But then I was surprised to see the title of the pension fund, because since I had worked with them before, 10 years prior, I remember then they had a pension fund and they had the word ethical in the title. So, and this one didn't have the word ethical. It was a different pension fund, and I was suspicious. So I checked. As a vegan, you always check what everybody gives you. You don't accept it as such. You just go and check what is good for you, whether it has an animal product, whether it's ethical, okay. And I do that with pensions as well. Every time that somebody enrolled me into a pension fund, I check where the money of the pension fund is invested. Because they work like in this way. They take money from your salary, they keep it for a while before you get older. They invest it in the things they want to invest in, and then they give you part of it when you get older. I wanted to know where they were investing it. And they were, I was shocked, I discovered they were investing them in the worst possible companies I could imagine. Pharmaceutical companies testing on animals, petrol companies producing CO2, tobacco companies making people addiction, the worst possible company. And this was an animal protection organization, and I had chosen this for me. So I complained. I went to my bosses, says, look, there's a problem here. What's going on here? They blamed previous management. They said, oh, I don't know how it happened. Don't worry, we're going to change it. It was fine. I was pleased to know, because, of course, there were vegan colleagues like me, they working like me. They were all equally shocked. And donors that might have given donation to this organization, they would not like to have any percentage of their donation ended up in vivisection organization and companies. So it was good that they were looking into it, but nothing was happening. Management kept changing, people kept coming in and out. Every time there was a new change, I had to re-explain it again. A month passed, 2, 5, 6 months, a year, nothing was changing. And eventually, I decided to change it myself, because if you don't like the pension fund that your boss or your company, your employer provided, you can always change it. As long as you have one, that's fine. So I decided to change it to one that had the word ethical, that didn't invest in any of those companies. And I told my colleagues, in the office, that if they want to change them too, if they don't want to wait forever, they could do it, and I tell them how to do it. And because of that communication, I was fired. I was fired for gross misconduct. And I thought, well, that's something very wrong here. I am just doing what an ethical vegan would do. I am just trying to help other vegans to find vegan solutions to problems. I try to find, from all the options I have, the one that is more vegan friendly. There are pension funds that are better than others from a vegan point of view. I can choose them. Why can I tell my friends how to do this too? So I thought that's an unfair thing. I had no choice. I've been fired actually because I'm an ethical vegan. That's what happened. So I went to a lawyer and I said, look, I've been fired because I'm an ethical vegan. Am I protected? And the lawyer said, not quite. You could, but at the moment you're not, because you're not following a religious belief, which is automatically protected, but you're following just philosophical belief. But don't worry, because there is a way out of this. The Equality Act 2010, which is the equality law that protects or that defines what in America we call it protected classes. In the UK, we call it protected characteristics, like gender, racial, sexual orientation, marital status, or disability, all the things that are protected as classes or characteristics. Religious is one of them, but the Equality Act 2010 in the United Kingdom has added belief. It's a religion and belief. And he also specifically says there are two types of beliefs: religious belief, automatically protected, and philosophical beliefs that could be also protected, but there is a process to select which ones pass the test. So veganism had never been tested before. So I was the first one that I had to put the question, should ethical veganism in particular, meaning veganism following the official definition of the vegan society, not just somebody having a vegan diet, that's a dietary vegan. An ethical vegan is somebody that seeks to exclude all forms of animal exploitation and cruelty, which is the definition of veganism. So nobody had tried ethical veganism before, and I could be the first. But the process meant the judge had to look at a series of conditions that had to be fulfilled for my belief or that belief to be protected. So I had to go to a pre-hearing, a hearing before my actual discrimination hearing, in which I had to produce evidence. I produced more than 1,600 pages of evidence, and I had to convince the judge that it fulfilled all the conditions. And the judge said, and the judge Puzzle in Norwich Employment Tribunal in the 3rd of January 2020, the judge said, yes, it fulfills them all, overwhelmingly, each and every of them. And you are an ethical vegan, as you say, because I couldn't make it up, so I needed to prove that I'm an ethical vegan. And that was huge because nobody ever had done anything like that anywhere in the world. No jurisdiction gives veganism any sort of protection until that point. So the judge with the Equality Act says veganism is as protected as any religion or any other protected philosophical belief. No less, no more. And nobody had gave this recognition, this legal recognition to this belief that is important for us, but often many people laughed at us for believing it. It was so huge that the rest of the world was very interested to know my story. Those that hated it and those that love it wanted to have my opinion. And last time I checked, there was more than 1,600 website articles talking about me in 67 different countries about this story. So it was a happy story at the end of this, the story number 2. Let's go to the next story. The next story is my book. Because what happened is, because there was so much publicity, some person saw it, and the person was Hannah McDonald, that she's a publisher of a small publishing company called September Publishing. She approached me and said, look, you need to write a story about this. There's a book there. You need to write how you did it. This 2 years litigation that lasts for 2 years. And I said, fine, I would gladly write, but I also want to write about my life as a vegan, how I became a vegan, because I think that's interesting, and also about the history of veganism, the concept, the philosophy, the past, how it was created, because I think it's lacking. There are not books about these things. And she said, fine. So I said, excellent. So I produced then this book, Ethical Vegan, A Personal and Political Journey to Change the World. And I wrote it very fast because my case ended when the lockdown for the pandemic started. So I had nothing else to do than to write an average of 13 hours a day. And what it should have taken 2 years, it took just 3 months. It was published at the end of December, the same year that I finished my legal case. My legal case and in December was successful. The pre-hearing to tell me that veganism is indeed a protective belief, but then my full merits hearing to show that I had been discriminated. That was in March, and I was successful in that one too. So it was settled in my favor, and everything I asked was given to me. And the company said you had not done anything wrong with your communications. It was done because you were a vegan. It was compensated economically, all the good things. So basically, it was the first time there was this protection that had been confirmed. It was the first time that had been applied to a person like me, a vegan, and successful. So that was good. So and the book essentially is 3 stories. The 2 ones I already talked to you, but in extended form, the story of my life as a vegan and the story of my legal case, and then also the story of veganism. Trying kind of to answer 3 questions. One is the question is, who am I? It's the story of my identity, me as an ethical vegan. Then this question of what is this? What is this world? What is it made of? It's made of creatures like me. I'm not a special. There are other vegans like me. There are other animals. There are sentient beings. And it's also is this little case that happened to me that started with my email. I wonder, what is this email about? But the third is about what should we do, which is ethics. What's the behavior we should be doing? And for me, very easy. Ahimsa, do no harm, is a very simple thing to do. A very simple behavioral tool. Every time, anything you do, just be sure you're not harming anyone that could be harmed. And that's part of the history of veganism, because the history of veganism is the history of ahimsa. I think the modern concept of veganism is just the modern manifestation of the ancient concept of ahimsa. And I wrote many aspects of my book, but at the last chapter, the book has past, present, and future, because talk about the history is the past. I talk about the present, how I become a vegetarian vegan, but also how I manifest my veganism. What choices do I make? So to make it easy for a new vegan to choose what to choose, I just write it down. But also the future, how I imagine the vegan world would be and what we need to go and do to get to that vegan world. And so in the last chapter of the book, which is is the future is vegan. What I'll go is I go and check the trends, because I researched the past, the history. I was in a good position to see the trends. I see how the past and the present, and now I can see the trends, so I can imagine easier, because I haven't looked at the past that helped me, how are we gonna get to the vegan world, looking at the trends. Some of them will help, some of them hinder. And I just want to mention some, for instance, human population growth. This is obviously not good. There are more people out there. It's more difficult to become vegan because there's more people consuming animal products. Or flesh consumption, this is increasing, and still that's not a good trend. Climate change, well, it's not good for the climate, but it's actually good to make people become vegan, because it's making people aware of the reasons of climate change, and therefore perhaps they can become vegan because of environmental reasons. So that could be good as well. Pandemics, the same thing. People connecting pandemics and animal exploitation and animal agriculture will make them change, perhaps. Fake news or false news, that's bad, because we rely on the truth. And if there are more fake news, people will not care about what's true or not. How we can convince somebody that our facts are right and somebody else is wrong if people don't care about what's true or not? So there were all these different factors. And then I looked at it and I thought, well, altogether, I think there are more trends that are positive than trends that are negative. So I think we're going to get there. How long is another story, but we're going to get there, because although there are trends in all directions, I think there are more that push us toward the vegan world. And I end the book with a diagram. You can see a diagram, which is about the vegan world, how I imagine, how I visualize the vegan world. You can see it better here, in which there's a middle bit that says that's the vegan world where all people are vegan. And then around all the things we have achieved, no more pandemics, no more systemic carnism, and all the things around those things, there are smaller things that we need to achieve. So it was just a way for me to visualize that vegan world. And that was the end of the third story about my book. The next story is about my current profession, and that ends begins with the end of that previous story. Because what happened is I had a book, and then people read the book, and people like the book, and people say, we want you to write things for us. vegan organizations, animal protection organizations started to hire me as a freelance writer, and that's my current profession. I've been an animal protectionist all my life, but now essentially I'm a writer. I'm a writer on veganism issues and animal protection issues for different animal protection organizations and vegan organizations. I'm one of the main writers of Unchained TV, which is part of this event, and I'm so glad that I'm part of that team too, and of Vegan FDA, which is one of my main clients that I write a lot about different aspects of veganism. And while doing so, I wrote one article in the 18th of December 2021 titled The Rise of the Vegan Boardgamers. And the reason I wrote that is because I wanted to answer a question that was bothering me. The question was that being in London, which is one of the cities with more vegan-friendly cities in the world, there's a lot of things to do as a vegan. So you can meet many other vegans, do many social events. There are many clubs, vegan clubs of vegan people that go to theater, vegan people that go running. And I used to participate on many before the pandemic. And one of them was about board games. Vegans just meeting to play board games. And I kind of like board games, although I'm not a gamer as a proper board game, but I just like them, some of them. So I used to go. And it was quite interesting to see that these meetings become more and more popular, more and more frequent, more and more people coming. And I was thinking, why is that happening? Others, they're not growing that much. Is there something between board gamers and vegans that really synergize each other in a way that makes them super compatible? Is there something happening with these two groups that they are connected, and therefore that the sum of both might actually generate something bigger, something some properties that we are not seeing just by looking at each other separately? I just wanted to answer this question, but I didn't know enough because I'm not proper board gamer. So I actually asked proper board gamers. I interviewed them for my article. I interviewed Antonio Favata, Ian McDonald, Andrea Romeo, philosophy, some of them game designers, some of them organizers of these events. This event in London called Geek Extravaganza, like playing with the word extravaganza with the word vegan in the middle. Which is one of these. So I asked them question, do you think there's something there, a connection is there? And I concluded at the end of the article, yes, that there is something, because there are many things that connect, that make it possible. One is logistics. The fact that playing a game is often already vegan friendly. They are not vegan products in most games. They are just paper and plastic. So board games are easily to continue playing them. If you're vegan, you don't need to change much. Or the fact that there are so many vegan venues now in London, it's easy to meet and play in those ones. So logistically, it becomes easier to play. Also because vegans, we're still the minority of people. We still have this social problem that everywhere we go, we are just the minority. So we like to socialize with other vegans. And having things to do when you socialize, like playing games, that's a good thing. So having another excuse to meet with other vegans, that works. But there were more deeper things. For instance, some of the people I interviewed mentioned the geek culture, that people that like games. They often are people that go against the grain. They like challenges. And we vegans do the same thing. We go against the carnist wall. So that's something in common. Also, the tendency to like consistency and logic. We vegans have a very easy system. Don't consume animal products. And it's so easy for us. We don't have to be nuanced about it. We just reject them all. And that's simple. And we like that. And gamers, they like models of reality. And they like the simplification of reality through the game. So there is an affinity of logic and simplicity and consistency that we both groups have. There's also things about gamers being social pioneers that like to explore other worlds, alternative worlds. Well, we vegans do the same. We are starting to explore the vegan world. We also pioneers in we are not afraid of the common status quo and we challenge it. And that's part of the psychology of it. And some more deeper things is that we kind of vegans, we are returning back to nature in a way. Silas mentioned that because, yeah, we are essentially vegan creatures that for 1 million years or so, we experimented with meat eating, but it's still biologically and mentally, we're still frugivorous primates. And gaming is also said that is really a very primitive thing that we all do, all mammals do, it's not just a human thing. And playing games is really going back to our primitive gay person. The Homo lugens means player, the human player is a primitive human that started telling stories under the fire and playing games. So this going back to nature and reality away from artifice is something both groups can common. So it seemed that there was connections between two worlds. So it could be that there's a rise of the vegan board game. We're going to see more and doing more things and playing more important roles than we thought, not just two groups meeting, just perhaps by meeting, creating more interesting things. So that's the end of this story. Next story is about my view of board games, obviously connected to this one. Because at the end of the article, I also said that perhaps we can actually use games to get to the vegan world sooner, because we can use the games to test strategies. If we want to have the vegan world, it's not going to happen if we don't build it. It will have to be built by us, vegans and the rest of the people, but especially the vegans that we know, we are aware that we need to build the vegan world. So it's an action that we need to take, and we need to take it, and that might be doing different things, and how we know which one have to do first, prioritize, where and how, all that is a strategy. And so we need to be able to find out where we're going, to visualize that world, but then to test different strategies and not to waste wrong strategies in the real world and then failing and having to step back and then spend more time trying to get to the right vegan world with the right strategy. We can test them before actually applying them and see which ones would work better than others. And board games can be used for that. Board games can be used to veganize the world. Veganize the world in the sense that the world is a carnist world. Almost everything we do and we see is made by carnists, for carnists, trying to indoctrinate us into animal consumption. And that means board gaming is the same thing. And when we want to veganize the world, we want to replace carnist things with vegan things. Cinema, theaters, novels, and games. Games are many carnist games, so we want to create many vegan games. And we want to veganize the ones that already exist, change them, modify them to make them veganized. We've done many of these things in these vegan groups I used to go. I myself have created a different version of chess, a vegan version of chess. I call it vegan chess, which the games not to kill the king or the opponent king. The aim is to save the horses, the knights. I call them horses now. And so we just basically need to protect the horses from the other player. And if you manage to protect them completely so they can no longer be killed, then you won. And the rest of the pieces move exactly the same way. But just by tweaking 2 or 3 rules, you completely make it a vegan version of it. So that's kind of always be done. Design new games that are vegan, that send the vegan message. Because remember, games often are entertainment tools, but often have moral story. They are narratives that people use to tell stories. The famous Monopoly game wasn't as it is today. The idea, the creators, they didn't call it Monopoly game. They call it the landlord game. And it was a morality tale about how bad landlords are, how bad these capitalist people that exploit tenants, how terrible these are. It was subverted by the carnist and made it a game about winning and money and destroying your enemy. But that was not how it was designed. It was designed to actually expose this. And that we have to be aware, because we might create a vegan board game that is subverted and make it an exploitation board game. We have to design it in a way that is against that. But that means there is a function in gaming, in telling stories and telling moral stories for allowing people to learn. So this is one aspect of games, which I think are interesting. But the other one that I mentioned is we can use them to test strategies to build the vegan world. Because essentially, games of any sort, not just board games, they are very mammalian thing. They are essentially a method to learn about the world without having to pay a price. So if you're a growing mammal, you have been born, not quite developed yet. There's a lot of things you have to learn: how to fight, how to hunt, how to defend yourself. And if you fail while you're doing it, you might starve or you might be killed. So you better train yourself in games with your friends to find out how to move your body, how much you bite, and even the moral aspects of it. There are many ethologists like me that we consider that non-human animals are also moral agents. They also have the ability to know right and wrong. And Mark Beckhoff is an ethologist that writes a lot about this. I interviewed him not long ago. And he studied play behavior in coyotes and other canids and wolves. And he saw the rules that when you play, there are rules. If you break the rules, you punish. Then you punish, you ask for forgiveness. And this is how you learn the morality of what's right and what's wrong in that society, because each group will have their morality. You apply the rules in the games that you play. So we do that, the same thing with our games. So therefore, how does it work? Because first, the stakes are theoretical. You're not hurt, so you can see the bad consequences, but you can play it again. So that's how you can learn again. But also because it's a simplified version of the world. It's a model. You remove variables. The world is too complicated to just be able to understand how it works. So it's too much, it's overwhelming. You just need to simplify it, remove things that don't matter. And that's what designing a game is. In a board game, you remove a whole dimension. We only have 3 dimensions. You put it in a board, you just have 2. You got rid of a third of the world. So it becomes much simplified now. And the rules are more simpler. So you eliminate all the things that confuse you so you can play it and really learn, because otherwise you'll be overwhelmed and you would not learn. You would just be closing your eyes in despair. So that's what we can use. We can use the games to train yourself to build a vegan world, how it would look like. And if you fail, we play it again and test different strategies. So essentially, as a way of learning how to strategize, if you organize an organization yourself, you lead an organization, you want to know these sort of things. So if you have a person of any position of power, any position of decision making, and you want to make a decision, you want to know that is the right one. So you want to test it before. So all of us, part of the vegan world, that we have the ability to veganize the world and to push it forward, we just need to test the best way to do it. And games can give us that. And as an example, I'm going to give you, that's the end of this story. The next one, the final one, is I actually tried that. I said, oh, okay, let's give it a go. Let's see whether I can design a game to create a vegan world. And I haven't designed it yet. I just thought about the idea of how I would go about designing it, which is I'm going to explain it to you, because it's all linked to the end of my book. You remember the end of my book? That was that diagram. That's already 2 dimensions. They already given me a part of it. So that's done. I can do it from this. Okay, let's have a board. You go. I have a board already. Well, this is not wasn't designed for a game, but it could be based about that. These could be the end of the game. Everybody is the vegan world. These are the first things we have to do. Then, for instance, we have to be able to achieve this, to be able to achieve that. So the condition to fill this one is to complete this one. So to get to there, we have to complete this. To get to complete this, we have to complete that. So there's an order there. And these are things, it doesn't matter what it says, because I could change it around and create more. But the idea is that you could perhaps have each player has some pieces. And in order to fulfill or to complete one of these objectives, I'll give you some example objectives. Exotic pet animal band, or veganism, veganic farming replaces organic farming. Zoos ban. These are specific things that had to happen to have the vegan world. But for instance, let's say that we use 5 pieces to finish this one. So you start having the choice of dice, because it has to be some random elements, some luck, because the world is like that. We are full of luck. So let's throw a dice. If it's 1, I can use 1 piece. I can choose which one I put it. If it's 2, then in 2 pieces, whatever I want. If it's 3 pieces. Then if it's 4, let's have a pack of cards that tells you all the good trends, the good things that could happen to help us to move to the vegan world. So if it's 4, you take the card and tell you things such as vegans have reached 3.5% of the population at one point in all of them. So gradually we're much closer to the vegan world. Or if you have a 5, then you have the bad pile, the pile that pushes backwards. And then you take something and it says something terrible, such as 80% of the vegans, they stop being vegan because they like burgers too much. And then we just have to remove points. So create jeopardy, create things that help us, create things that don't help us based on the reality of the world. And perhaps you've got the 6, then you have both a positive and a negative, because sometimes things happen both negative and positive at the same time. And then if you do that, and you put real people playing it, you might realize, and obviously you need to win within a particular amount of time. Basically, there's a number of turns that is the limit. If you haven't achieved the vegan world by that number, you fail. So you then realize that you need to cooperate. That has to be a cooperative game where all the players together have to have each other to get on time to the center. And then you might learn that there are different ways to do it. We can just concentrate this easier area. You might say that some of the bubbles might be fulfilled with more points than others because they're more difficult than others. For instance, banning zoos is quite more difficult than banning circuses, for instance, because they're fewer. So let's have one require 3 points, the other require 5 points. So then, obviously, that means you could decide to go for the easy ones first as a tactic, or not, just go for a section, because the interesting thing, part of the rules could be that when you fulfill one bubble, that increases the chances that the adjacent ones will be fulfilled because they're all connected. So then you fulfill that, you add 1 point in the other. So you just see that they are relationship with the bubbles. They're not isolated. If they are sideways relationships, a goal that you really haven't worked can actually help you. So if you ban something, for instance, hunting is banned in here, by it is zoo are banned. So a kind of connection there. And before the other side is wildlife trade is banned. It's all connected there. So obviously I ban one of these, this gets easier. And what's the center? Most pandemics averted because they all come from wildlife exploitations and zoos and things like that. So you suddenly see that there is a direction that is never linear. It's never one single direction. It has to come from all directions, but there's parallel and sideways connections. You start to understand the nature of the world. The nature of the vegan world had to be like that. And then you can test it in different ways with different players. And the reason I told you all my previous stories to this point is to tell you that this game is my game because of my life and my experience and my stories. You do yours, it's going to be different. Because I created that game because I was born in Catalonia. And for me, I knew that the world could be changed because it was so bad that it could be changed. So for me, created that radical game where everybody is vegan is very doable. For somebody that's been born in an easy place, they might think, oh, that's impossible. Let's do a reductionist game where you just reduce suffering as opposed to abolish. I'm not that kind of guy. I've seen how you can change from terrible to better. So I can do it this way. Or because I work in animal protection in many different subjects, that's why I put them there, because I know they're all important. While somebody that only works in veganism might make all this game about food and only food. So each of us will be able to create a game which is not necessarily better than anybody else. That means we can test them all. We can play somebody else's game. And then if we start to compare them, we can start to see, okay, there's something in common in all these games. They are different in these aspects, but they're common in these ones. And then we might actually find and design the ultimate vegan game, which is compatible with all the visions of the vegan world or all the vegans. They will be very diverse, but if we keep doing this, we actually might start to simplify the games itself. So the same process of creating a game is a simplification of the world. We may create an ultimate vegan game, which is a simplification of all the vegan games out there. And it could just go to the point that the vegan game becomes a thing. So there, I don't know, you know, this organization called, an award is called the Sembia Award. Somebody mentioned this the other day. Sembia Awards are awards to games that are no longer colonialist, because there's so many games that are about colonies that somebody decided, okay, we have to incentivize people to design games that are not about colonies, actually opposite, anti-colonial. And the best ones, we're going to give them an award. So I imagine there could be in the future the Ahimsa Award for the best vegan games. So there could be something that might actually be useful, not just for entertainment purposes, but to send the vegan message in a more effective way and to learn how to build the vegan world by visualizing, not just visualizing how it looks like, visualizing how we play it, how we interact with other human beings. Board games have a simulation like video games, but one thing board games have the video games don't have, or don't have less, is that in board games you're facing another human in a table. So we are not simulating human psychology. We're playing with 100% flawed human beings. So when we have a perfect system in a computer, it might work, but we put it with human beings, it might not work. With the board games, we can even test that. We can put flawed human beings against each other and recognize we are too selfish to play that tactic. We actually have to incentivize you in some way to play. So these are all my visions about playing games. But in the end, we all playing stories, giving stories and playing games. Playing is learning, learning is producing and progressing is building. And so if we want to build the vegan world, we have to play to build the vegan world. So this is it. So time for questions that anybody want to ask me.
Hi, Jordi. Thank you very much for a lovely presentation. PJ, if it's all right, I have a couple of recorded questions.
Yes, go ahead, and then we'll take some on the screen.
Okay, great. Ray asked, could your philosophical beliefs as a zoologist protect your compassionate action on behalf of animals?
My philosophical belief as an ethical vegan is what was protected. The zoology is my degree. I was a scientist, but philosophical belief in veganism is obviously a belief that covers every aspect of veganism, and veganism being this philosophy that eventually ends in wanting to live in that vegan world I just described. But as an action means that you try to exclude in this carnist world, which is not the vegan world, try to exclude as much as you can all possible forms of exploitation of animals and cruelty to animals. In the vegan world, you don't need to be vegan anymore because everybody is already vegan, so there is no longer exploitation. It's not part of the rules. That's the advantages of games like that. You play the games in a carnist world where things are against you. But when you win the game, this is actually a sustainable game. It's not a finite game, because when you win the game play itself forever, because the vegan world is safe forever, because there's nobody breaking the bubbles anymore, and all the bubbles are maintained in that position. So yeah, the protection was essentially for my vegan, and not just me, everybody else that share my veganism, and that means any other ethical vegan, because I didn't invent a version of veganism. I said my veganism is the normal veganism. I follow the official definition of the vegan society. So the judge said everybody else that follows that definition too will be equally protected. So that's why it became a significant thing, because all vegans became automatically protected.
That's great. We have one more question from Dariada. What do you believe is more important, individual animals or whole species? And she gave an example when there is a conflict between the two, for example, experimenting on a few to help the entire species.
That's just so easy to answer. Individual animals, 100%, because species don't exist. Individual animals exist, species don't exist. A species is a classification system that we zoologists create to find out, to tell when we talk to each other. So they're all classifications, they're arbitrary. We say sometimes that the species is a group of individuals that can interbreed, but then we create all sort of exceptions. So these should not be different species, but they are still a convention. So species is a group of individuals that we use them for classifying, then genus are a group of species, families group of genus, etc. They are classification systems. What is real out there are the individuals. So that's why if you are conservationist, you should be a compassionate conservationist. And a compassionate conservationist is a conservationist that doesn't care about species as much as cares about the individuals.
Beautiful. Thank you very much.
Thank
PJ?
you so much. Yeah, thank you so much. And I see Nancy is on here with the question. I want to say that your enthusiasm for games has moved me into now I want to play. And I think some people will want to know how to get how to do that chess that you talked about. I want to play
Well,
chess.
just on that chess thing, the rules are in the article I wrote. So in the article link, yeah, I put it in the chat, so you can just find the rules there.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. Okay, Nancy, go ahead with your question, and I'll unmute you.
Okay, thank you so much. Oh my God, that's so exciting and so creative. It's stimulating all kinds of ideas. One, I have like two kind of parts to my question. One is there's a scientist, a biologist named Rupert Sheldrake. I don't know if anyone's heard of him, but he has a whole theory about fields of energy and the remembrance. So like even like taking a test in one part of the world, the people taking it after that, there's already that it's already in the mind. And somehow the people going after do better because it's the answers have already been figured out in the mind. So just your engagement with that and the possibility of all of us making board games and stimulating all this thought. So I guess my question would be, Like, what do you think about that? And then my second question, which is
Well, let me
very,
answer this one, and you can ask the question.
yes,
Otherwise, I'll forget. So
good.
the I think it's an interesting proposition. But we all connected. We all know that. But how we are connected, that's the mystery. People might say telepathically. Now, as a biologist myself, I'm not that inclined to believe supernatural beliefs because I don't need them. Everything that I see in nature really is sufficient for me to understand how things work, including what you just said, because we are connected with our past. So we all are descendants of somebody that was the same. And that connections is genetic. We carry it with us. So a mosquito and I, we had a common ancestor at one point. And we share the same genes. Some of the genes are identical. Of course, we're gonna do and look at the world similarly because we are family. So we connected by descent. All humans, recently, we just went all the sons of a couple of people. Imagine if mosquitoes were connected with us. Humans obviously were just really close family members. Of course, that what any human does is going to be connected with any human does in the other part of the planet. So if I play a game today here, that's a combination of all the genes I have with me, plus all the experience of my growing up, plus all the things I've seen on TV. Of course, and somebody on the other side of the world probably have many of the same genes I have. We live in the same world and see the same things on TV. And and it's the right time. So of course, we're going to be ended doing the same thing. So that's my answer.
Beautiful. Thank you. That's so moving and instructive. So the second question is just about, just to put out the idea of, yes, luck and, but also I was wondering, yeah, maybe if it could be like somehow made cooperative in answering questions about veganism, about animals, about authors who've written books like yours, like the whole philosophical, spiritual, the whole like Christspiracy is coming at the whole thing about that history that we all share, that it could be that kind of jeopardy thing where we all cooperated to get there within a certain amount of time or something like that.
Yeah, in fact, what I know is that, and I wrote about this in my book, that I feel ahimsa, which is the old way of saying veganism, ahimsa is biological. I don't think it's just cultural, that the Jains started to use this in Sanskrit times, and Pythagoras used another concept, but was the same idea, another word, and the Taoists, the same thing. It can happen spontaneously in different parts of the world. But I think it happens spontaneously because it's in our genes. So because I see ahimsa in animal behavior, being an ethologist, I see animals behaving, I see it all the time. They have a very clear to me way of understanding do no harm. You go to a park and you see a pigeon, the first thing that the pigeon will do is will step away from you because it doesn't want to harm you and you don't want to harm him. So I completely understand this logic of doing no harm is actually better than going and attack you. So this is such a common base thing, this doing no harm. So this is a fundamental biological thing that we all have, that then become a concept and then become a philosophy and then become a part of religions like Jainism and Buddhism. And then you got secularized and become the vegan society in 1944. But it's still the same thing. It's still the same concept of doing no harm. And when you look and analyze strategies, and there's something called game theory that analyze how people that plays games, which strategies should work and which are really more likely to succeed than others. So when you start to apply to group of people, so these options of cooperate with each other or fight with each other, be selfish or be altruist, people are looked into this, have realized that when you test people, the cooperative strategies tend to win. So people are inclined to choose cooperation. We think carnist education had told us otherwise, have told that we humans are selfish, everything we do is, when you look at data, is actually the opposite. We have a tendency to cooperate. We are social species, and we just forced to be selfish by a society system, a capitalist system that is not real. It's just there to benefit a few people, and they tell you, well, that's the way it is, but it's not the way it is. So we put us there without that capitalist society, we spontaneously will be more cooperative. And that's why we have genes in chromosomes. So our genes are in cells, and our cells are have a genus, sorry, have a center, nucleus that has all the genes together in a chromosome. While they're all together, they could be all separate, trying to replicate each other and fight against each other, because evolution at one point says, well, it's better we just reproduce together. Let's put together all of us in a chromosome. And then the cell said, well, why don't we put several cells together rather than fighting each other? Let's create multicellular organisms. And they said, well, why don't we create societies with multicellular organisms with many cells that have many chromosomes, that have many genes? You see, all that is a force in nature that tells you cooperate works. Selfishness is also there. There's a force in nature that tells you competition, all those forces exist. But in my view, when you give time, and that's what evolution is, give time, the cooperation wins. So that's why I think the vegan world is inevitable. I am certain it will happen. That's not the point. The point is, will it happen soon enough? So we're not killing too many animals in the process and ourselves. So we should accelerate the process. But if we didn't do anything, I'm sure it would get there, but in many generations ahead. We want to do it the sooner we can.
Thank you so much. Great, Nancy, for bringing that out. I see that Ray is on here.
Hey, Jordi, a great presentation so far. And I want to remind everybody that we're going to be continuing the conversation the next hour in a panel discussion on what do the games we play say about the future we want. And we can get a little bit started here because you talk about board games. And we're going to have Patrick Baboumian on talking about the video game that he's developing and compare with a few other online games. This digital space, you're talking about analog board games. Is there an advantage to embracing things that are analog, that are unplugged, that are face-to-face, that are across a table? How do we compare?
Yeah, I think the advantage was said earlier, you can test human psychology better. You can, through both games in computer games and board games, try to reproduce or model reality. They are models of reality, sometimes a complete reality, a different aspect of reality. But the video game has advanced through the history of the video game to make that reality more and more similar to the actual reality. So it becomes a process of simulation almost. It's no longer modeling. It's becoming a simulation, while the board games remain modeling. They haven't advanced to the point that you're thinking, oh, I am actually this little piece in this board. You know all the time that you're just playing it. While in the game, you can get lost into it. Like a movie is the same thing. A movie is many movies are just games in which you identify with the main character. So that's the player of the game. And then you just that plays the proxy of you as a gamer. So you can see watching a movie being taken into a game that is played by you identifying with the character and choosing as you would choose if you were that character. So when you play an actual video game, you really make all the choices yourself. So that's 100% simulation. So you gain the ability to experience something, but you lose because it becomes too complex again. You lose the ability to learn in the simple lessons. You just learn more, you behave, what to do, but it's more difficult to have a bigger learning perspective of a moral story than a board game. Still, you can do it, but a board game gives you more perspective because you look at it from a longer distance. You're less involved physically, you're more observing it, and therefore you are in a receptive way to understand big moral narrative stories. While in the video game, it's more subliminal. The story gets to you subliminal. What you kind of learn is to negotiate obstacles in a very similar way that you do in real life. So I think they're complementary because you need both. And mammals, they learn both things. They learn the moral thing, abstract moral things by playing, but they also learn how to bite, how to run, how to chase an object that moves away from them. These are physical, real training things that they need to try. And they learn both. So I think the combination of both means some are good for other things, but we need them both to learn.
Great. I thought like 3 more questions, but we'll be joining that panel in a few minutes.
Okay.
Thank you so much, Ray, and thank you so much, Jordi.